And we're back. This is the Colombia Calling podcast. I'm Richard McColl, your host here in Bogotá, Colombia, 2,600 meters closer to the stars. It is a beautiful day here in Bogotá. My very special guest this week is an author. She's in San Diego. There is a personal connection here. And she has a new book out, well, hot off the press. It's called 5 Days in Bogota, and we are talking to author Linda Moore. Thank you so much for your time on the Colombia Calling
Oh,
podcast.
my pleasure. Hello, Bogota. Hola.
Thank you so much. Now, for those of you watching on YouTube, she has her book in the background and a couple of Colombian flags decorating the bookshelf. So thank you for that. 5 Days in Bogota. I've had the opportunity to read it. It's a very fast read. It's like a car chase, I think, kind of cinematic with plenty of dialogue. But we'll get into that in a minute, because it's not everyone who writes a book about Colombia. It's not everyone who bases their book in Colombia. So I know that my audience, my listeners, a very literary bunch, very much so, all around the world, mainly in the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, and then Colombia, will want to know about you. And on your bio, Linda, it says writer, traveler, author, but recovering gallery owner. Tell us about how you came to be a writer after all of this.
Well, I stumbled into it as I have done with most of what I've done in my life. I didn't set out to write novels. I didn't set out to run a gallery.
Mhm.
I studied Latin American politics in college and have a master's degree from Stanford in that world. I have always loved Latin America. I found my way there through studying Spanish and went when I was 15 to Mexico DF and was swept away into a world that was so different from my Scandinavian parents and grandparents. And I was loving the energy and the life that I think you find throughout the region. So I became a fan and continued to study the area. But mostly, while I did study literature, I mostly studied the politics of the region.
Swept away, I think, is perhaps the best way of sharing and explaining a feeling about when you come to Latin America. It does sweep you away. There is a vivacious nature that's to life. And you studied the politics. Studying the politics, something I have done too, is it can be hopeful and it can be very forlorn. And you're quite careful in your book. You don't go much into the politics, but again, right into that in a second. But how do you feel that then studying Latin American politics for so long, could that affect and really define the kind of art you looked for to hang in your gallery? Was it politically motivated art and so on from Latin America?
Well, actually, I kind of came back to that from uh, the fact that I found so many people. Let me back up a little
Yeah.
bit. I found myself married and in San Diego and not really able to go travel to the areas of the region that might have fit with my research or my
Mhm.
interests. So I took a position with a group at Children's Hospital
Mm.
in San Diego where they are uh, really, trying to help kids and find teaching cases in Tijuana. So I
Mm.
was a liaison that went back and forth. And I began to realize how ignorant most Americans were about Latin America in general. And that set me off on a sort of mission to help, whether it was a physician who couldn't understand customs and culture that might relate to a child's disease and their cures or diagnoses and treatments, And that kind of set me off on a different direction after much time and
Mm,
more time in the healthcare field. I I decided that I could educate people better about the region through art.
mm,
Not necessarily visual art, but music and literature. And people open themselves up more, I think, to learning through that rather than didactic presentations about history and political dynamics and so on. And, in some ways, I'm one of those people who believes you cannot separate politics from the rest of it.
oh no.
It comes as a package,
Mm,
and you need to really understand it all. Unfortunately, we like to pigeonhole things in the US,
mm,
and it often isn't so much the global macro view
mm,
of all of it. And I uh I was at one point thinking with a family I couldn't do this heavy job and also manage all that the rest. So
mm,
I decided to open an art gallery and fortunately had a friend who was our ambassador, the US ambassador to Argentina. And he and his wife invited me to come to Buenos Aires and stay with them in that amazing um, home that the US owns.
mm,
And they introduced me to the cultural attache of Argentina and also Uruguay and Brazil. And I began to meet artists. They took me to studios, and I was just overwhelmed with the originality and the ideas and how many artists, especially at that time, that was the late 90s, in the late 80s,
mm,
and at that time, everybody was in Argentina and Uruguay. They were still reeling from the dictatorships that had, been very recent. A lot of artists had
mm.
basically hidden because they feared imprisonment. So this was such an interesting story, and I loved what they expressed in their art. So that set me off on that path.
It's true. This separating the politics from the whole package. In Colombia, they are inextricably bound. Obviously, politics and the people. I always find that something you mentioned there. The let's say the ignorance. I think it's general, especially international. I mean, for the UK market, and ignorance about Latin America is because it's not our field of it's not our field of interest. It's not part of the old empire. Let's say we kind of extend into the Caribbean, but beyond there, it's not so much. We might learn a little bit about the British Legion in the wars of independence for northern South America and so on. We might, but it's always fascinated me that the US would have less information about the area that is very much the sphere of influence when we think of everything. Can you attribute this ignorance to anything? I mean, because it's so strange to me that it's kind of like the U.S., Mexico, and then a bunch of countries below that.
Well, I don't know that'll make you feel any better, but I don't think we know anything about Africa either. So,
Okay.
so, so I feel uh, that part of how we do learn, honestly, is our salad of immigrants, where not a melting pot, but the
Mm.
salad where we can. What was it? Octavio Paz, I think, said, "We will eat anybody's food."
Yeah.
and enjoy their music, but I think beyond that we need nudging to learn more. When I had the gallery, I printed out a map of South America so that the people worked in the gallery would, number one, know where Uruguay was and
Mm.
Argentina, and And they often would pull out those maps and show the people came in the gallery
Mm,
what the geography was. It was that we were starting at that basic level. And I feel good that through the art that people have understood so much more about the region. And
mm,
I hope also that's true of 5 Days in Bogota and the
mm.
book, where people will learn a lot about Colombia and maybe let go of some myths and some ideas that come from the very limited feed we get about its history, especially the recent history.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's the kind of the most illustrative, the most visual negative recent history, which kind of moves things on. But before we get into that, I mentioned to people beforehand, there is a personal connection here. You are in San Diego. My most stable home my whole life has been in San Diego since 1977. And I know that at your launch party up there, I guess La Jolla or San Diego,
Yeah.
my stepmother attended, and it was quite the knees up. You had dancers, you had live music, you had food. Um, it was, I mean, this is a serious undertaking. You
Someone
continue.
called it a wedding, so
Oh,
I married everybody to Colombia.
yeah. And then it was
Yes,
dancing.
yes, there was cumbia. We had dancers. We had, and these are such interesting people
Mm,
because they live here. They're very much American now, but they have this Colombian heritage. And we had faculty member from UC San Diego
mhm.
Medical School who is a ophthalmologist, a surgeon, and he plays guitar, has a wonderful voice, and another harpist played Colombian harp, and then we had the cumbia dancers and the drummers and eating arepas, and the only thing we didn't have was our agua ardiente,
Oh
which
God, no.
you we were concerned about liquor liability. So we just said, okay, there's plenty of other things to drink. So we had something called limonada de coco.
Oh, I
So
love that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
better. We bring aguardiente into the equation, and a couple of people will take their shirts off and fight. You don't want to.
well,
I don't.
that would have been memorable.
It's true. All press.
I think it violates the dress code at the club in La Jolla.
Well, very nice. And I know that my stepmother danced. I know she did. She loves to dance.
Oh,
She's an artist. There you go. I had live cumbia at my wedding all those years ago. So
oh, how
I try
fantastic.
because
Where were you
Monpos.
married? In San Diego
No,
or
in
um,
Cartagena. In Cartagena. Yeah.
okay. How
So
fantastic.
yeah, just outside, well, within the walled city, towards Getsemani, a very obviously an ancient church. And we shipped in our cumbia musicians from Mompos, where I have my hotels, because it's very famous for its cumbia. And they played at the reception, and we all danced cumbia or a version of cumbia. Was enjoyed by all, and I truly love it. So it sounded like, from the reports back from my stepmother Paula, uh, it was quite the knees up. And what I'm concerned about, Linda, is that every single launch party you're having is you're shuttling in salsa and cumbia musicians. And I mean, will you be doing it in this fashion in every single one? I've looked at your
No,
website.
no. I was in Austin, Texas at a bookstore called Book People doing a talk with another mystery writer who's actually has been a prosecutor, is now a defense criminal attorney. So he's an interesting guy. He writes about art crimes and things.
Mhm.
So we have that in common. But the University of Texas in Austin is one of the fundamental places to study Latin America
Mhm.
in the United States. And I wish I'd had more time to go over there, especially to the archives that they have there of Garcia Marquez's writings and some other things. But and I suppose in defense of the United States that there are robust programs to
Mhm.
learn about the region, and the graduates of those programs work at connected to what
Mm.
they studied in some way. So that's there, and that's a positive thing, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're looking for the information, you find it. I don't think obviously it's not everywhere you want it to be. Yeah, I was going to mention that about the University of Texas. I do know that they bought all of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's notes and diaries and so on. One day I'll get through there. One day I'll get across and just to get a glimpse.
Yeah,
And
I wonder, what do you have in Bogota? Do you have some of those archives there, or it wasn't his wish to have them there?
I don't think he wanted anything in Bogota. I know obviously half of his ashes after death are in Cartagena at the University of Cartagena down in and the other half are in Mexico. Um, there is that little museum in Aracataca, his hometown, but that was closed for many years while they tried to work out, is this his grandparents' home or is it the Buendia home from from the Hundred
Ah,
Years of Solitude? So
right.
he, he it's a conflicted relationship. Of course he's Colombian, of course he never lost his Colombianness and his love for Colombian culture, but his politics were not aligned to those of the governments in power of turn. And he self-exiled to Mexico for a very long time, came back infrequently to Colombia. But I think more than he never felt at home in Bogota, even as a student and so on. And he always felt far more at home on the Caribbean coast. Of course, he is a costeño. He was, is, will forever be. So I think you sort of take that region, the Caribbean area, Barranquilla, Cartagena, Aracataca. His wife was from Magangué, which is in front of Mompos. She went to school in Mompos.
Wow.
So all of these kind of places, and the Guajira, are very much more what I would say is his identity, rather than interior Colombia. And you know Colombia very well. It's dozens of countries but with a shared frontier. Is
Well, that's true of most countries, but
Yeah.
thing I want to comment on, and I've traveled to over 100 countries. That's a different story. But what I have learned is people are not their governments.
Hmm.
And his story is not unlike the story of many who live in a place, they love the place, it's their home, but they don't necessarily define themselves
Hmm.
by whoever is in political power. I tell a story in the book of meeting Garcia Marquez
Yes.
in Bogota, and I don't know if you want me to
Go. No,
share
I want
that.
you to talk about it. Yes.
Well, anyway, I was at this art fair. I had written a letter to the cultural attaché in the American embassy, and it was just on a whim saying, I'm coming to Bogota. I'm bringing the works of an artist, a California artist, who in his work is informed by literature of all sorts. And he created a series of paintings on 100 Years of Solitude. So you see Macondo, you see the Coronel, you see, all the things. And it's wonderful work. So I wrote to the culture attaché on a whim and said, would you invite Garcia Marquez to this art fair in Bogota? I'm bringing this work. I'd love to show it to him. And I got a very nice letter back saying, Mr. Garcia Marquez apologizes. He is entertaining 11 Latin presidents from Latin American countries with President Gaviria. And I thought, oh, well, I guess I understand. It's more important work. And I forgot about it until I got a message from the art fair office saying, come, we have a message for you. This is days before cell phones, right?
Hmm.
So I went and learned that indeed he was coming, and he was coming with Gaviria. And I was like stunned. So I, rushed back to my booth and try to, get my head together about how to do this. And The thing that is really clear in my memory is I'm sitting away. I can't see the door of the big convention center where this was happening. And I hear this kerfuffle of like people coming in the door, and it's the press and cameras and all this. And that was Gaviria. And then the next thing I hear is a roar, like Taylor Swift, or in the day, Madonna had entered the hall, and it was Garcia Marquez. And I thought, how can you not love a country that gets it so right that this is the president for a minute in time, and this is an author for all eternity? And I will never forget that moment and the love that you felt in that room for Garcia Marquez. It was, I get goosebumps even
Yeah.
talking about it.
And you met him.
Yes,
You
I
met him.
did.
And he
And
signed your book.
he came to the booth, and he knew he was looking for these paintings, and so we chatted. The artist, I phoned him in between and said, "Oh, he's coming," and he said, "Well, you have to gift him one of the paintings." I said, "Which painting?" And he said, "Well, you'll know." So these were little encaustic boxes that in the back had collages of clippings from his books, Garcia Marquez's books, and Faulkner's books, where the artist had taken things that he felt connected or related to each other. And Garcia Marquez was adorable. He looks at the back of this. I'm explaining all this, and he puts his glasses on and he puts them on top of his head, and he looks up at me. He says, "You know what happens is I forget what I wrote." It was so charming. And so I said, "I want you to keep that painting. The artist wants you to have it." And he was so touched. And he said, "Oh, when are you leaving? You want to give you something." So I said, "I know famously you don't sign autographs because he probably gets mobbed by people." I said, "But I have this old book from my student days in Madrid, and I would love you to sign it. Would you do that for me?" So he takes the book in his hand and he stares at it and he turns it over. And at first I thought he was like thinking he didn't want to sign it because it had coffee stains. I mean, it was truly a loved book from my student days, paperback, whatever.
Yes.
It was the only copy I had in Spanish. So I wanted to have that with me. And then he looks up and he said, "Where did you get this book?" And I told him, and he said, "It's a very rare copy." He said, "This was printed by Sudamericana in Buenos Aires. And when the shipment was sent to Colombia, this is in the late 60s, he said the government destroyed the entire shipment. So
Really?
the only books that survived were some, of course, in Argentina, but also the ones that were shipped to Spain in Spanish." And he said, "The idea that you have brought this book is full circle. It went from Buenos Aires to Madrid and then to California, and now it came back to Colombia to me." I mean, he was really touched, and he signed my book, Gabriel, which I love because people call him Gabo and all
Yeah.
that. But my husband knows if the house catches fire, forget the wedding photos, the kids' photos, get the book and save it because it's one of the most precious things I own. So anyway,
So
that's my
I mean,
story.
I was going to ask, you still have it?
Oh, of course. Would you like to see it? I
I
can show.
would. I would really like to see it.
Hold on 1 minute.
For those of you listening to the podcast, Linda has stepped out of the camera, off to the side, and has returned. I've seen that copy. It's in a
Yes,
museum,
I
though.
have too. I met someone the other day who has this copy, but you see what I mean about how it's rather,
It's
rough.
well read, well loved. That one,
Yeah.
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 Uh, uh,
So, and here we are. He
Hang on,
has on this.
don't
Can
put
you
it
read
down.
it?
Yeah, I'm going to take a photo of it as well as we do that. Perfect. That's amazing. What's it?
Eh,
Una.
Una flor para
Para,
Linda. Gabriel,
Wow.
1991. And he's drawn a flower.
That's
It's pretty much,
amazing.
it's pretty much the way that I wrote the scene in the book.
Well,
Because the
yeah,
scene
I would say it's
there
almost
in 5 days.
verbatim.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
would
is.
say I can understand why a scene in the book, that's the book we're talking about, 5 days in Bogota. I can understand why you would want to put that in there. It needs to be shared. It needs to be shared. For those of you listening and not watching us on YouTube, the book is I've seen it exhibited in some places. It's sort of got there's a whole load of different, I would say, rectangles on the front with the different, blue rim on a kind of cream background. Some of you will know what I'm talking about because you will have seen it as well, but it's an incredibly rare edition. So yes, let the house burn down. Let burn the wedding
Bye-bye,
photos.
kids' photos.
Oh yeah.
Forget it.
Oh, you've probably got those on a USB now somewhere else. And so save the book. And especially now as we're in the 10-year anniversary of his death, that's quite momentous. I feel part of it now. Thank you for
Yay.
showing it. Amazing. It's amazing. So you got to meet Gabo. You had a little time with it. He signed your book. He drew a flower. That's something to definitely work into your work of fiction because it's not fiction because it's
Well, he has a bit of a bigger role in the
yeah,
book, but I'm not going to give things away. Most people still have yet to read the book. I hope everyone
exactly.
will read it. It's about well, I don't know. Do you want me to share? It's
No,
about
shared.
a gallery, a recently widowed gallery owner with 2 small children who goes to an art fair in Bogota to meet wealthy collectors and save herself from bankruptcy. And during that time, she gets swept into some nefarious art shenanigans and has to figure out a way to extricate herself. It's a
Mm,
bit, I would almost call it more suspense than a thriller, but it
mm,
is a wild car chase.
mhm,
A romp of a book. So it reads very fast, but it takes you through some beautiful places in Colombia. And I love when the critics up here call it immersive, that they feel they are there. And that for me means I succeeded to describe and remember well what that experience was like. I'm sure Bogota has changed a lot, but some places, Candelaria, for example, I don't imagine has changed much at all. And I hope that everyone appreciates. I'm anxious for people from Bogota to read the book, or Colombia, who know Bogota, because it's always interesting to hear what you got right and what you got wrong. But I work very hard at it. It's like,
yeah.
what color were taxis in 1990 in Bogota?
Yeah. Well, was it first? Did you first come down in 91? Was it or 1990?
91.
91.
It was 91.
So
It
it was a
was
different city back then. I mean, it was.
from now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh
yes.
yeah.
Oh, yes. Of
Uh,
course. It like everywhere, like
yeah.
San Diego, like
Yeah.
everywhere.
And I mean, the Candelaria has improved immensely as to what it was. But if you're to walk around on a Sunday evening when everything's shut and there's nobody out, then there is a different sort of sinister side to it. But if you're
Mhm.
going around daytime, weeks, weekends, it's a beautiful place, obviously, and culturally so very rich, and galleries and so on, and great restaurants. Um, yeah, I'd say that. I mean, I would say because I think the book takes place in the 90s.
Correct.
Exactly. And so
Correct.
I mean, you do make it very clear the sort of, I would say the overwhelming word I would use is that you express chaos. That's
Well,
for me.
there are components. I took a lot of trouble, and recently there was a big review in Book Trib about uh, the book. And one of the comments he made is, the trouble I took to uh, clarify what was true and what was not true in this author's note. But some of the challenges were there's no cell phones.
Mm,
There's no way to sort of call home or get an email or a text. And, um, it presents challenges in the way and opportunities, because it's more tension when she can at any minute reach her children and know that they're safe.
Mm,
So it is both good news and bad news, but it's something you have to tiptoe around. And I think there was this feeling of tension
mm,
everywhere. I stayed at the Tequendama Hotel, and at that point, there were armed guards outside the hotel. There were checkpoints
mm,
all over the place. I think they were trying to keep the FARC out of the capital. I don't know. I mean, a lot is like, from the
mm,
perspective of a person who's not in the inner circle
mm,
and really doesn't know what the purpose of things are, who's the good guys, bad guys. And the bottom conclusion she came is she couldn't trust anyone
mm. Yeah,
except
again, it's
herself, except
definitely.
herself, which is, you know, a good
Well,
friend.
1991 was very, very different. Of course it was. I mean, I didn't make it to Colombia until 98, and it was very different then as well. And 1991, and of course, the Tequendama was owned by the military as well. So it's.
And when I stayed there, I did not know that. But
Mm,
later I learned how Escobar's wife and kids were sequestered there in the
mm,
hopes that he'd try to reach them and they
mm,
could track him down.
mm.
So that hotel has an interesting history in
Yeah.
itself.
It now looks like I'd say it looks like a dam, one of that huge big buildings that's sort of there amongst far more interesting architectural buildings that have sprung
Yeah.
up.
It
It's not
I
beautiful.
don't remember it being an architectural marvel when I
No.
was in the 90s. So I think it was always kind of one of those big
Yeah. It's
boxes, right?
very solid is what I would say. Very solid indeed. And of course, um, so I always ask this of authors that come on the show. No, I mean academic authors, no, but authors. And it's kind of my offbeat one. But of course, you're an author, and you hope for growth. And as we've been talking, is you've got US publishers and bookstores think that you've got 2 months to get the publicity out there. But I personally believe longer. If it's a quality work, then it's going to last. Of course it is. So obviously you want to sell the movie rights, and you're there in California. Who have you got playing Ali, David, and
Oh,
Enrique? Those are the three key players. So Ali is you. I'm sure
no,
it's written about
me,
your.
me in a different era,
Yeah.
perhaps.
I'm getting the Ali feeling talking to you as the first one, and then David, who's the kind of slippery former lover, now involved in all sorts of different things, and then you've got Enrique, who's kind of I don't know, do we trust him? Do we not trust him? There's a sidekick there. You have to have an idea of who could be in the screenplay for this.
Well, I'm terrible at those sorts of things. Who do you think? You might have an idea.
Oh, Ali, you see. So I'm thinking, I mean, what kind of age are we putting Ali at in this one?
Late 30s, early 40s.
All right. So let's have someone up and coming. Do you think Ali could be God, what's her name? I'm now
See, this
forgetting.
is what happens to me when
Yeah.
I don't answer your question.
I wanna say, oh, I'm gonna have to look it up right now.
See,
Give me a
this is
sec.
why they have casting directors,
Yeah, I'm not
Richard.
a casting director. Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway. That's what I was thinking.
Yes, it could be Anne
All
Hathaway.
right.
I saw her recently in something that was quite risque. I was surprised because, I think of her as the Princess Bride or whatever that movie was.
Princess Diaries, wasn't it? It was that
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
Princess Diaries, yeah. But
Okay.
anyway, I guess she's quite diverse. Yeah, she absolutely could be Allie. Sure.
And then David Martinez could be someone who's a little bit slippery, but also earns your trust. I would think maybe Jeff Kinnear.
Yes, but I
Uh,
think he needs a little bit more Hispanic pizzazz to him than
okay.
Camille,
Bit dark. Wait, I
because
know.
he's Martinez after all,
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to go for the typical Antonio Banderas. There are
Yeah, he's
plenty.
too old anyway. He's got gray hair now.
um,
Even Michelle doesn't like him.
So we'll think about that. And then Enrique, I don't know. I really don't know. Would you
Oh,
get
well, he has to be Colombian. So who
yeah,
can he
plenty
be?
of Colombian actors, or I guess at a stretch we could get a Mexican in there, someone like Diego Luna maybe, or something. If we
Maybe.
think, there you
Yeah,
go.
there's quite a few
Oh yeah,
uh,
many.
you could get. So, yeah, I think so. I'm surprised, I'm nervous actually that some of these people might be too close to people I actually met, but I'll leave that speculation to
It's
you.
all right. It's all right. I don't know who they are. I know Gaviria. I know Gabo. I don't know him personally. I have met Gaviria personally. I saw Gabo speak once. No, I don't know these people, so we're okay. I think that's fun. I think that's a fun game there. Now, as we close up, because it's a big, we come to the end of this. It's a big question. It's a big question from Colombia. Really, is that obviously people here are very keen to turn the page on
Mhm.
yesteryear and those dark years of Escobar and the FARC guerrillas basically infiltrating the city. That not far from where I live is the big private club El Nogal that was bombed. I think it's been more than 14 years now of impunity, and they're going on. So there's things like that. Colombians are very keen on turning the page. And I often say, well, you're not going to be able to turn the page completely because it's something you're going to have to address. But at the same time, we should promote the wonders that are found in Colombia, the scenery, the people, the culture, the dance, the literature, and so on. We should the bird watching. We should do this. But in the writing of your book, in the writing of 5 Days in Bogota, did you find yourself saying, okay, I need to lighten this up a bit. Maybe there's too much, of a dark Bogota here, of a dark thing. Because I know in the like the notes at the end, you do say that you are, trying to tell people that Colombia is an incredible place, and the food and the regions.
So did you get that from the book,
I got a
from the
bit,
story? A bit of it, but
a bit
not
of it.
maybe as much as I think I gave you.
Uh,
So let me tell you my perspective.
mhm,
I think one of the things the book does is it does not push people into good guys and bad guys.
mhm,
There is a lot of gray area, and the US owns that too
mhm,
because of the way they got themselves into the middle of it. Didn't necessarily help. And this is such the story of the United States relations with pick any country in Latin America, practically. It's never been motivated by really lifting up the countries that the delusions about helping people is misguided, and
mhm,
I hope that comes through in this book too. During that time, helping with the drug war, I suppose the best thing we had to offer was the fear that you could get extradited to the United States, and that was a motivator to try to cooperate with the government of Colombia,
mhm.
and yet I don't know that we played our role very well either. So I think there is value in revisiting the history
Mm,
and hearing more about the facts of what happened during that time and the sincere struggles that the Colombian leadership and the Colombian people had to try to figure it out. They were being hit from all sides. I had the opportunity to meet one of the members of the delegation
mm.
that was trying to resolve. I'm sorry, I've forgotten. They were meeting in Iceland or Norway or someplace
Ah, yeah.
uh, to solve the problems of trying to forgive the FARC, move on, and so on. And it seemed very hopeful at the time that I happened to talk with this fellow, but I'm not sure where it sits now. These are tough things. I visited Belfast in Northern Ireland, thinking, hey, they've moved on, but yet the children in Northern Ireland still go to Protestant schools and Catholic schools. There is no public school to speak of. And until the children can play soccer together and not against each other, but on the same team, how do we get on the same team? Because that's the way to move forward. And sometimes revisiting the past, writing the history of the past in a different way than how it's shown on American television, for sure, is important to do. And if the book doesn't do it perfectly, it's okay, because what the book does do is open the conversation, begins the dialogue to say, so what happened and where are we now? And how do we appreciate the riches of Colombia and not condense it into this one horrible, evil, difficult time, and think about it from pre-Columbian artifacts and amazing cultural contributions that even the Spanish recognized. And, the history of Bolivar and what he contributed to the independence of many Latin American regions. And I could go on and on. You know it better than I do, but I love that now it's in the conversation.
Yeah.
And I have met with hundreds of people, maybe even thousands, in the last bit where the book has come out. And I look forward to meeting with even more people to talk about why these stories are important and why it helps us to rethink our history and have a perspective that helps us set aside what is valuable, what is worth keeping. And that's, for me, that made it worth it to write the book.
Well, I can think of no better place than to bring this to a close after that. What a very nice intervention there from you, Linda. I'm going to send people to your website. That's lindamoreauthor.com. So it's LINDAMOORE, author.com. The book is available in bookstores in the US, all good bookstores.
All the online, and now it's also available in audio.
Oh, there you go.
If you prefer to listen to your English, then read it. There it is.
Audio, and of course, Amazon, everything else. I've seen it up there. Some phenomenal reviews. I won't read them out. I'll send everyone to the Amazon page or wherever else. Go to a bookstore, buy them there. But aside from that, thank you so much. As I said at the beginning, it's a fast read, like a car chase scene. That's how I read. And you call it suspense. And I think of it cinematic and with lots of dialogue and so on. So I read it incredibly fast, which is always that's a good sign from me, because otherwise, if I put it down and walk away, it's because it's lost my attention a bit. So there you go. I read it very fast. Thank you for sending over the PDF copy to read previous to this conversation. Thank you for your time, and of course, showing us, for those of you watching on YouTube, showing us the Gabo autograph in the book. I can hardly believe it. I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness. So thank you again, everybody. If you're interested, there you go. 5 days in Bogota by Linda Moore. And of course, we support writers and we support these things. So go out and have a read, have it, and so on. Linda, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, really. And please reach out to me. If you hit the contact button on my website, those emails come right to me. I love to hear from you, all of you.
Perfect. This has been episode 521 of the Colombia Calling podcast. Thank you to everyone listening. Thank you to those of you who continue to support us on patreon.com/Colombia Calling. I've been Richard McColl in Bogota, speaking to author Linda Moore. Thank you, everyone.